please. Welcome to the Ojai Basin Groundwater Management Agency meeting of July 25. Did we get the machine turned on?
Yes.
You want to call a roll, please?
Director Hayes,
Here.
Director Johnston,
Here.
Director Fenn,
Here.
Chair Baggerly,
Here.
and Peter is at
Not going to make it. And neither is Dan. Okay, would you all rise, please, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Ready to begin.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, item 3 is director announcements, reports, and comments. Is there anything to report from the mutuals? Since they're not here, I guess they don't. Do you know anything for the mutuals? No? Okay. Ohio Water Conservation District?
Nothing to report, did not meet.
Nothing to report. City of Ojai, anything?
Nothing to report.
Good. Casitas Municipal Water District, this has to do with the lake level. And I'll speak slowly, okay? The elevation of the lake was 505 feet above sea level, which means there is 105 369 acre feet in the lake. That's 44%. Sure. The lake elevation is 505 feet above mean sea level. In the lake, there are 105 369 acre feet. That equals 44% of the total. Not bad for July, the end of July.
Is it going down now?
It just started, yeah. Community Facility District, you got anything, Rick?
I don't have anything.
Okay.
There's this report.
The what? Okay, well, that's in your,
It wasn't, and I
Okay.
was having a medical emergency, so it's a handout right now.
that's no excuse. Really? Okay, the Ojai Service Area Report is item 3, and it's before you. If there are any questions, somebody will answer them. Hearing none, we'll move on to General Manager comments.
Just a few things to report. Over the last month, I've had a couple meetings with Ms. Vandermeer, talk about administrative needs, agenda planning, future focus of work that needs to be accomplished.
Okay.
Worked on budget projections for the board committee meeting that was scheduled for the, it's at the 22nd, right? I think it was the 22nd, Monday. Met with the ad hoc committee on conjunctive use planning. It was on the 17th. Met with the ad hoc budget committee on the 22nd to discuss the draft budget and potential revisions. And then my conference call on the 16th with the Department of Water Resources regarding their recommendation on the alternative, to not approve the alternative, and which will be discussed later.
John, you're really sounding like a general manager. Thank you.
Did it for 9 years.
Okay, basin status reports. Jordan.
Thank you, Russ. The handout that is on your desk and also near the speaker's cards on the table is the latest water level hydrograph for the Key Well area at Carn and Grand. This is the Elrod well, which we have our data logger in, recording water levels every 90 minutes. So I must say I lied when I said last month on the 28th that the water levels were still rising in the basin, because as of 7 a.m. that morning,
They were.
they stopped.
Oh.
And they began to recede. So apologies for that inconsistency. The beauty of our business is that you never really know you're in a drought until you're in one, because you can hindcast and look back and see a peak behind you. And the same thing applies to this hydrograph. Nevertheless, we can say that at 7 a.m. on the 28th of June, the depth to water was 118.45 feet, meaning that the basin was at approximately 76% capacity, holding 60,800 acre feet. This remains about an 8-year high and a significant increase over the course of the water year. What's interesting in looking at some of the other loggers that we have nearby in the basin, and as you know, we have several of them, there's a couple that need to get some love. The Topa Topa well number 5 well has a logger in it that's been recording data for a number of years, and the direct read cable has been severed by someone at some point, and we haven't been able to download those data, but we do need to get either a pump rig or jacks on top of that pump with Topa Topa's permission, of course, and loosen it enough to where we can pull that logger out, unless they're pulling that pump out for their own purposes. Also at the Lago Marcino well, where we've been able to collect data and continue to collect data for some time, that cable was also starting to not read. So we're starting to see the age of the infrastructure needing some assistance. But the data are still there, and once we're able to download them, that's fine. But up at the spreading grounds rehabilitation site, the depth-specific, depth-discrete monitoring wells that are there, they reach their peak much earlier in the peripheral portions of the basin than in the central portions where the key well is. And in fact, the peak at the alluvial base well at that location was January 23rd of this year. Wow. And that was a very narrow spike. And the attenuation of the water levels as it's receded from that point in time is a very broad recession. And there's another peak or two that are very close to that point as well. So that depth to water of 163.71 feet is relatively shallow compared to the much deeper, but not that much deeper, 173 foot the year preceding. So we have quite a bit of difference throughout the basin, and what we have with these loggers is the ability to see when those peaks occur, what their magnitude is, and how that wave of recharge moves toward the center of the basin before the ultimate recession annually begins, which is now. Questions?
Do we need to order you some new cables?
We have some new cables in our inventory that
Okay.
just came back from Canada. So once we get to speaking with the well owners, we'll be able to replace those.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Jordan, the one that peaked in January, do you think that's accurate or bad data?
I think it's accurate because it's very consistent year in and year out.
When did, because our bigger rains were a little later.
Exactly, but it's a very broad iterative curve. So as that first flush comes through, it always tends to have a very steep increase in water levels, or increase in storage in that portion of the basin, almost as soon as the end of November or beginning of December rolls around. So a lot of it's coming from stream recharge as the foliage drops in the headwaters and things of that nature, but also the October, November, December rains that hit. They tend to get that well, and really all 5 of those wells, if there is enough water, in a very similar correlative hydrographic pattern. So, long answer to your short question, but I think it's accurate.
Thank you. Anything else? The next is item 6, public comments, and I had a speaker card from Bill. Did you want to?
I think it was an agenda item, speaker card.
8.
8, okay, thanks. Are there anybody who wants to address the board at public comments? Okay, moving on to consent items. We have the minutes.
No, we don't have minutes.
Correction, we don't have the minutes. They will come along next month. Item 8A,
The speaker's card.
the treasurer's report for June 2019. Which one was it, Bill?
The DWR
Oh, okay.
response, state response, your response. I think you'll have several on that.
Our first item is the treasurer's report. Any comments, questions?
I have one. On the treasurer's report, I put for period July, it's supposed to say June. The first page. I apologize.
Under subject.
Under
Yeah.
subject.
Okay,
And also, I've been getting a lot of the extraction statements back. I haven't had time to put them in the database, so that report is also, will come next month.
okay.
Had a busy month.
Yes. How's your eye? Good. Any other questions about the treasurer's report or the budget? I'll give you a minute or two to have a look at it some more.
We deal with the consent items yet?
Yes, we did. The minutes aren't available until next, or the next page.
The consent items, aren't those separate?
No.
Oh, the only
Yeah.
one was the minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, if there are no further questions about the treasurer's report or the budget spreadsheet, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to accept or
Okay.
file?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Could you call the roll, please?
Director Hages?
Yes.
Director Johnston?
Yes.
Director Finch?
Yes.
Chair Baggerly?
Yes, thank you. The next item is item 8B, the final audit. Finally.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. But the fiscal years are starting September, is that right?
October.
October 1st.
Or October 1st, yeah, the end of a fiscal year is in September. So we got 16 and 17,
And we'll start,
and we do it every 2 years, is that, okay, so what are they doing in between? I'm not quite sure what value this has.
No.
Well, this one was late, I think. So we're proposing to budget for another audit this year.
Yeah.
So we'll have it through the end of September 2019.
once the 2019 year is closed out, then we'll be able to start the budget. And hopefully, we can have it by early next year,
The audit, yes.
the audit, and you'll have it for, 18 and 19.
Yes.
It was unqualified, so.
That's right, that's what I always look for.
I would move approval, if that's what you're looking for, or acceptance, or whatever the proper term is.
Got a hand in the audience?
Oh,
I had a question about it.
Come on up, Emily. We can get you on tape.
It's a minor issue, but on page 13, under other concentrations, it says this agency provides management services to water customers. Agency's ability to provide water. This agency doesn't provide water. It regulates extraction and studies the water, but we're not a water provider.
You're on 13 or 14?
Minor thing, but it, big
Page
difference.
13?
Page 13 of the draft, under other concentrations.
Okay.
It just makes this agency sound like a water provider, which we're not.
Correct.
I would fix that. Thank you.
Well, I also like to note that the auditor did not note two deficiencies. I think the first one we reconciled. The second one on the financial control system, we're working on preparing that now, so I'm hoping we'll have it at the next board meeting.
That sounds good.
So I'll second it if,
Everybody understands that it'll be coming along, right? Okay.
And when we're approving a draft?
No, it was still draft at this point, so that's why, once the board approves it, then we'll have the draft taken out of it.
so we could make that modification.
We can make the modification,
Okay.
clarify that.
Yeah.
All right. We have a motion and a second, is that correct?
Yes.
We need a roll call, please.
Director Hages,
Yes.
Director Johnston,
Yes.
Director Finch,
yes.
Chair Baggerly.
Yes. With the proviso that it's going to be finished for the next meeting, the final, right?
The control policy and the rewording of the water purveyor or provider section.
Thanks, Emily.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on page 13 under other concentrations.
Yeah.
Got it. With those corrections, did we call a roll yet?
We just did.
We did. I better catch up here. Okay. The next item is item 8C. John, you want to chime in?
Well, I had the opportunity to talk with Department of Water Resources last week. They notified me by a phone call regarding their decision, draft decision, I should say, on the agency's submittal of an alternative. And their draft recommendation at this point is to not approve the alternative that was submitted by OBGMA. As a consequence, the process from this point forward is, as of that notification, and I believe I received an email the next day with the documents, that we have a few on the table here, and there's one, I think, on the public table, that the agency has 30 days to respond in order, if you wish to respond. If you don't respond, then Department of Water Resources will make their recommendation final. If you respond, then that sets the clock. They have 60 days to review your response, and then at that point, they'll either make the recommendation final or they'll make some changes. The unfortunate part of it is, within any response that we provide, the Department of Water Resources stated there can be no new information provided. So I'm not exactly sure what we can provide if we can't provide new
You
Oh.
information.
can't amend it.
Yeah.
Well,
So,
we're going to try to figure out something. Let me give you a little background about what happened yesterday at Casitas Municipal Water District, and we'll get to you guys' comments in just a minute. The issue was on the agenda for Casitas, and I will tell you that Casitas is very, very interested in providing help to the district because they're the major pumper in the valley, and it's important to Casitas to make sure that that doesn't have a problem in the future. So they adopted a ad hoc committee of Russ Baggerly and Peter Kaiser. The law firm of A to Z in Oxnard will be providing help, and the general manager, Mike Flood, will also be very much involved. So we have some work to do for the next 30 days. Well, it's less than that now. So I'm suggesting that we also adopt a ad hoc committee to deal with this issue. Do you have something else, John, you wanted to point out?
No, other than, I know you should have a couple of documents with you tonight. One that was provided by Director Hages, some comments that he provided looking at the Department of Water Resource response. And then I put together a spreadsheet that just highlights DWR comments as well, so.
All good work. Thank you, Richard. It
was good.
very good. Shall we take some public comment now? Bill, you want to take the floor?
Spent Sunday reading the staff assessment report posted on the DWR website, which is useful because it also had postings of alternate plans that had been approved. Mm-hmm. So I didn't read all of them. I think 9 were approved and others were rejected. So it was interesting trying to read and compare and contrast. So I just wanted to come down to what my summary perspective is on this. When I was teaching economics, one of the principles I really tried to get across to the students was the principle of don't let sunk costs affect your decisions about future allocation of resources, time or money. A lot of effort has been made in terms of putting the alternate plan together. And the question is there any point in trying to salvage it, as opposed to taking the scheme or taking the staff assessment report and saying, all right, here's a structure of, there's some good things in here about the management of the basin, and here's a kind of a roadmap of what we should do to satisfy DWR and move forward with a sustainability plan. Because when you read the last page of the staff assessment report, there's a couple statements that make you wonder what on earth could be submitted to change their mind. And I'll read 2 of them. And it's not meant to be critical, it's just like, this is their state of mind, okay? And so they state the department could find no evidence that the agency defined basin conditions it sought to achieve or maintain, or that the agency established objective criteria to maintain those conditions or to actively manage the basin to any standards whatsoever. In addition, the apparent lack of management to define standards of the last 10 years do not support the agency's conclusion of sustainable groundwater management. It's not a matter of whether that's true or not. It's what they think. And at this point, I view it as a waste of resources to try to salvage the alternate plan. It's to take the constructive suggestions they've made in here and try to build on that and build on gathering resources to move forward with a sustainability plan. That's my perception.
Thanks, Bill. Mr. Ulrich.
Mr. Wyrick was very graceful, as usual, in his comments. And some of my comments might be redundant, but I think they're going to be more specific. This 2016 OBGMA Basin Alternate Plan is, and was so described during public comment when under public review in 2016, as a non-responsive to the state DWR requirements bit of flim-flam, presented by a then cash-strapped board as a means of finessing both the Ojai Valley public and the state of California. It's also a monument to hubris, ego, and ultimately a colossal and expensive failure to this agency. May be seen, too, as a cynical attempt to justify the historical failure to manage or perhaps distract from management failures of the OBGMA board, who were then seated in 2016 and produced and affirmed this rather sorry excuse for work product. In the interests of credit and perhaps accountability, the latter of which is typically lacking in the boards of public agencies, the OBGMA board members under whose direction and ultimate approval of this document were Jerry Conroe, Roger Essick, Mark Zimmer, Paul Blatz, and Russ Beggerly. Also participating and contributing to this, in my view, waste of public fee money, but in consulting roles, was Mr. Mundy and Mr. Keir. Since the OBGMA will need to resubmit in some form, I will return to future costs later. It should be noted that as another notable failure of this agency, the San Antonio Spreading Grounds has not diverted a drop of water into the Ojai Basin. While this board celebrated that opening, it just turned out to be another case of folks, whether that's the county engineering staff or otherwise, who don't really know what they're doing. The only individual who remains on the current board is Mr. Beggerly, who reassured us, as you often do here and on other boards upon which you preside elsewhere in this valley, that you know what you're doing and we should trust your judgment. This would also appear to extend to Mr. Mundy, to whom California Department of Water Resources addressed their letter of rejection, and Mr. Keir, who somehow convinced the OBGMA board that a single key well could provide estimates for all of the groundwater level data necessary to both manage the Ojai Basin and generate an alternate plan report to the State Department of Water Resources. From the 7/17 Sustainable Groundwater Management Letter to Mr. Mundy, who appears to have been retained by the above-referenced 2016 OBGMA board as a consultant, and perhaps because the board at that time didn't want to do its own work or didn't know how. The recommendation, quote, "The recommendation of the staff is to not approve the OBGMA alternate plan due to the apparent lack of thresholds or other objective criteria, and an apparent lack of evidence that the basin was deliberately managed, and a lack of evidence that the agency has managed the basin to any standard for a period of at least 10 years. Nothing constrains the definition of sustainable yield. The alternative report appears to rely on data from a single key well to develop estimates of changes in groundwater storage, but does not describe how groundwater levels were used to develop the basin-wide storage estimates. This latter appears to be Mr. Keir's brainchild. In closing, the sorry excuse for an alternative plan report would have failed for form, content, and response to the requirements if submitted for an undergraduate course in a university. The Ojai community, water users, and fee payers, yes, even the pumpers who populated this board in 2016 and have received hands-off treatment for decades, deserve better than the hubris and cynicism that produced this useless article. Perhaps Mr. Baggerly, Mr. Mundy, and Mr. Keir are not embarrassed and ashamed of this debacle. If any three of them perhaps should do us all a huge favor and tender their resignations before this board spends a dime of its meager cash reserves, with these folks continuing to be charged with the responsibility of an alternative plan do-over. It appears that the state of OBGMA's financial resources and the pending requirement to develop and submit to state DWR a groundwater sustainability plan should not be entrusted to these individuals for further failure. Thank you.
Maybe next time, Bill, you'll tell us what you really feel.
I only had a couple minutes here.
Okay. I'm going to get right down to it. I think that we should adopt a ad hoc committee, and I am going to be on it, and I've asked Jim Finch if he will be on it, but Jim is going to also go on vacation for a week, so I would like to have Richard Hages as an alternate for that period of time that he's on vacation.
What would be the purpose of this committee?
To figure out what we're going to do.
And this committee is meeting in conjunction with the CMWD ad hoc committee?
That's correct.
And So the decision could just be no response.
One or the other, yeah.
Well, we have less than 30 days, correct?
3 or 22. One at
We
this
can always
point.
call a special meeting to get together and have a board action.
But I read everything. I went through all of this stuff. I wasn't here. I was familiar with the alternative plan, but the thing that I found valuable is in 2016, I think we were scared to death of this. And this delay that the alternative submission created, I think, has given time to really get a handle on what is expected from this sustainability plan. And I don't believe it's as terrible as we may have made it out to be. We've had some others have had experience with it. Upper Ventura River starting, and they're starting from scratch. We have a lot of data that we've collected over almost 3 decades now. I don't know that the plan is that difficult, and I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel on how we're going to get the state to accept something other than something that looks like a sustainability plan. Does anybody really on this board think that the state is going to say, oh, that's okay?
Right, especially if you can't submit anything new, or your work that has been produced over the last 2 months, 24 months, whatever. It's what was submitted is. So you're just arguing that the wall is not white, it's brown, basically.
Yeah.
You may not even be able to do that. That might be new information.
Well, I think the biggest fear that the agency has had is the cost, I would assume. I don't know if we've had a fear of what the results of this may be, but the cost has been the biggest obstacle.
It was to try to protect both the water resource and the pumpers so that they didn't go out of business. Because they're going to pay for it. We're not, unless we get a grant.
Well, I don't even know if we have any idea what it costs. Like I said, we're ahead of the game. We've collected a lot of information. We have a pretty good, even the reply from the state stated that we have a very good understanding of how the basin works, and we have a lot of data to support that. So I think we're far ahead of where many are. And Jim and I have been on this committee to work on the conjunctive use, which was supposed to be part of this alternate plan, and we've just started on that. And I think we've made some progress. It's a learning process. And at our last meeting, we talked about inviting Casitas to sit in with us so that we could talk about this together.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be more constructive than in having an attorney and 3 or 4 board members trying to figure out how to legally maneuver through this. I think we ought to get started and do it. I don't see how we're going to avoid this. I really don't.
My view of the groundwater sustainability plan and its process is that it is very complicated. It's not simple. They make you jump through various hoops with lots of. It's not going to be easy for this group or even for other people. The Upper Ventura River Basin applied for a grant of over $1 million, wasn't it, Bruce?
$630,000.
Yeah, and you didn't get all of that, did you? You did.
Almost everyone that applied got what they wanted.
Good. It's not going to be cheap.
Well, again, they're starting from scratch. It is a considerably more complicated groundwater basin than we're dealing with. Just the number of stakeholders involved is very complex. We really don't have that. It's a relatively small community with, I think, people understand what the issues are. I just don't see how we can object. If you look at what I put together, how we can object to developing what we believe to be undesirable results. I mean, that is on us. The state isn't gonna come and tell us, here's the undesirable results you have to manage towards or avoid. We do that. We sit down and we decide what those undesirable results are. I mean, that's the first part of this process. And we have a lot of data to support how we can avoid those in several categories. Obviously, in some we don't. But we're not deficient in every category. So, you know, I was talking to Bruce, and the way they're managing theirs, they hired essentially a project manager. And they just have task orders to do various things one at a time and get these things done, instead of just writing a contract to somebody to do a complete sustainability study. I mean, I have a little more experience in doing this kind of bureaucratic mumbo jumbo, but I mean, I was on the Cayugas Creek Watershed Planning Steering Committee. I was the chair of that committee, and it was on water quality and groundwater quality. And we had to comply with EPA and LA Regional Water Quality Control Board requirements for total maximum daily loads to the entire watershed. And it's amazing, the more you learn, the more you understand it's not as complicated as you may think. There are specific things that have to be done, and many of those are simply dealing with your constituents and getting them to agree and understand what you're going to do. That's our job. Can't hire a consultant to do that. And coming up with undesirable results, I think, is something we should be able to do. I mean, that's the first step. And once you have that, then you can start to look at, well, how are we going to control that? And then we're going to have to hire some expertise to do it. But we can hire them to do specific tasks, not do this big grand plan. Those are expensive, really expensive. And I honestly don't see what the alternative is. My fear is if we drag our feet too much longer, the state's going to come in and say, you don't qualify anymore. We're going to have somebody else do this.
I don't think that's possible because of our enabling legislation.
The state gives, the state can take away, Russ. I mean, you can't hang your hat on that. That's not, the Fed versus a state and we go to the Supreme Court. This is the state all by themselves. We're here at their graces, and they can make us go away.
Well, I really disagree with them that the only thing we got right was that we're not subject to seawater intrusion.
Yeah.
And they slapped us in the face for all the rest of the information that we did put into that plan, or that alternative. It's not really a plan.
But the problem is that what is missing are controls. We haven't defined what it is we're trying to avoid. What is the undesirable result? And what are the controls that we put in place to avoid those? That's what the plan is about. It's not about just understanding how the basin works. I mean, we did that. I mean, it's an important part, and we've done it. Now we've got to take that information and start to work down this bullet list of what we have to do.
Oh, it's a little bit more complicated, I think, Richard. Not only are we going to have to become experts in anadromous fish, we're going to have to figure out how the dry periods of the stream bed is going to affect groundwater dependent ecosystems. We're going to have to develop our own in-stream flow, no doubt.
I think
figure it out.
Obviously that is the touchiest part of this whole thing and the most difficult. But again, when you start to look at what they're trying to accomplish, I say the state, I don't think, eventually, yes, but we don't have to have this thing working and in place until 2040. So what we have to do is put a plan in place that works towards getting the basin under management control. So we have 2 decades to do that. I think the in-stream portion of it, the surface flows, obviously is complicated, and that's probably the place we lack. But I think we should have some discussion about that. We do know more than our reports indicate on how much water leaves the basin and goes down the creek. I mean, you can look at our data and you can extrapolate how much water at various elevations of the basin goes down the creek every year. You can just do a simple mass balance. So we know, and we know when that water stops going down the creek. So we know that. Now, what happens to it after it leaves the basin, I'm not sure that's our problem.
Might be.
It might be, but I'm not sure it is. So I think these are things that we need to talk through and talk through with our constituents. Again, is this a undesirable result that San Antonio Creek goes dry even though the basin's overflowing? Is you know,
There are discharge points, and we have a basic idea of how much is discharged to the surface water.
yeah. No, we do. And so I think we have a lot of information, and the cost in developing this plan is in the data gathering, particularly when you have to start at square one. So we don't have to do that. And, you know, we may put together a sustainability plan that is deficient, but at least we'll know what areas we have to continue to work on and what areas we've completed. And I think the biggest thing is starting a conversation with the pumpers and the community here on what these undesirable results are. I mean, there's a lot of that nomenclature in all these reports, but, you know, when you talk about an undesirable result, well, what is that? Well, we don't want the basin to go dry. We don't want the creek to go dry.
Well,
You know, I mean, those are real, you know, basic things, but there are a litany of others. One of them is an undesirable result is to price agriculture off the basin. That's an undesirable result. So the plan has to address that.
That wasn't one of the 7 that they outlined for
But
you.
we can develop our own undesirable results. That is up to the local community to do that.
Well, that's what we thought. We thought that we were in charge of developing this alternative demonstration to show that we are managing this basin effectively. And they have their own idea.
But, I mean, other than monitoring, what are we doing to manage it?
We are making sure that our safe yield is pretty much followed every year. And it does that.
Oh, yeah, how?
Well, it does that almost on its own.
Oh.
You want to try to fill in that blank?
Well, to summarize the entire several decade history of this agency and its management efforts, it would take much longer than we have here. But I will say that, you know, the agency has gone through the processes before my involvement here and since of going through its groundwater objectives, its management objectives, in a methodical, attenuated pace commensurate with its relatively limited budget. It's done a lot with what it has, with respect to outreach, with respect to understanding, with respect to testing, with respect to monitoring, with respect to modeling, with respect to recharge projects, with respect to understanding recharge and discharge, participating in numerous regional and local outreach programs. It's a long list of what the agency has done. And if nothing else, the response from the DWR to the alternative demonstration really just says, okay, it's time to put the teeth in the jaws of the agency that were built on the skeleton of the enabling legislature, the enabling act. And sigma or no sigma, we've observed, we've seen several drought cycles. We'll probably see more before 2040. And the job is to establish the thresholds as the original objectives were stated, in the original groundwater management plans and several iterations since, continue to monitor, continue to outreach, continue to do what has been done with, as Director Hages suggests, relatively small tweaks can really put a big amount of meat on the bones and teeth in the jaws of the agency. And that's something that whatever direction the alternative demonstration goes, whether it's really the first draft of a groundwater sustainability plan and all of the efforts, time, money, resources are by no means sunk in that regard. And we've got a well-documented, well-commented review, critique, constructive of that first draft. So the springboard is loaded, and it's, whatever direction the agency wishes to go with respect to this, the end will be sustainability. Whether we demonstrate that we have that by continuing to do what we've been doing to the letter of the desire of DWR, or write a new plan that does satisfy that. But implementing that sustainability is forever, and the drawback of always trying to prove a negative is pretty difficult to do.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and I think that's true. I think they did a good job in reviewing it. They didn't just give us a blank no, it's deficient. They spent quite a bit of time, and they've given us a pretty good outline of what we have to do. And, as far as managing it, again, if you look at what happened in the, when we reached, 2015, when we were at 263 feet below the surface, that's not a desirable result. So
That isn't counted against you though, Richard, in a drought for Sigma. Just isn't, they don't see that as an undesirable result because it's related to a drought.
who doesn't?
DWR.
The community and this board will decide what's an undesirable result. That's the law.
No. you
Yes,
don't.
no, that's the law. There are provisions that allow you to do certain things in drought conditions. But it doesn't, they don't say, okay, you can drain the basin. There are provisions in the law that there can be reduced stream flows, there can be, I'm not sure about lowering basin levels below what is considered undesirable, but particularly they recognize stream flows will be reduced during drought periods.
Yeah.
But again, my issue is this: I don't see any point in spending any resources arguing with them. I don't see what grounds we would have to argue.
It seems at this point, it's sort of a good faith effort, judgment on the part of the state. And if we fight them or resist at this level, we're talking about what, the balance of the first 30 days that we have, depending on when we get our answer back, if we choose to answer, plus 60 days beyond that for them to look. I mean, it seems like we're burning both time as well as potentially money. What is the upside of that? What do we gain from doing it? I always viewed the alternate plan basically as an application for an exemption for the requirement to spend a lot of money, and clearly that's not what the state is going to allow people to do if they don't have certain data points that you can be measured against. And yeah, it seems to me we should get on with it. Figure out what to do next and do it as inexpensively as possible. Submit what we will now call a sustainable water management plan to the best of our ability, and then what is the state going to do?
So I'm pretty much in complete agreement with Richard. I think the management, and there has been no appetite prior to Sigma, and the basin, because we have a very good basin that recharges fast. We can, I think, quickly and easily prove subsidence is not an issue, and that speaks to what kind of formation we have under the basin, and why we do get the good recharge. But, putting myself in the position of past directors, nobody wanted the fight, and it would have been a fight in good times to throw on things. So I get it, and it's, we haven't been that many years with knowing the initial SGMA. And we have the data, and maybe my naivete in these, I kind of thought, okay, they did give us some of the points that we need to clarify. But having said that, I also don't see, because Russ didn't mention that Casitas is wanting us to pay for the lawyers that are going to be present. So the main investment is time.
They're not, we're not paying them, Casitas is.
Right. No, that's what I said.
Okay.
Didn't for this. So I'm willing to invest a little in time and go down and hear what they say. Maybe they have a magic pill. I don't know, but on somebody else's dime, I'll listen to them.
Can I make a couple of comments real quick?
Sure.
There's a couple of things I want to point out as far as timeline, but one comment I do want to say, I don't think the alternative is a waste of time, and quite frankly, we didn't spend an awful lot of money on that. We can go back and capture that, but it wasn't hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was maybe probably under 10,000 or something, or even 20,000. But I think the information in there is a good foundation for if we have to do a GSP. There's a lot of good data that was put together. We have to expand on it. We have to but it's not wasteful document, but it certainly can be built on. As I said earlier, you've got 30 days, which now we're maybe 22 or something, to respond. If we respond, and then DWR has another 60 days, so essentially 90 days, they have to make a final determination. A groundwater sustainability plan has to be submitted by January 31st, 2020. And as Director Hages said, then we have until 2040 to really get it implemented and going and get the basin in compliance with your plan. But I guess one of the things I'd like to suggest is certainly we can meet, we can do things, but I'd like to see the next 90 days taken to sit down and figure out, well, what is it we got to do? And where do we need help and where do we don't need help? And we could bring that back to the board, understanding, because quite frankly, I think no matter how the agency responds, I don't think DWR is going to change their mind. And
Wait, when did you say on the submittal?
the submittal is due, the groundwater sustainability plan is
Yeah.
due January 31st, 2020. Or 2022, excuse me. I'm sorry, 2022,
Okay.
yeah.
Because our
I'm
90
sorry.
days just ate up a lot,
no,
yeah.
I meant to say
yeah.
2022.
Yeah.
So we have time, but certainly taking the next 90 days to try and figure out, well, how do we start biting this thing off at a time? And we do have much
But the
better.
two things can run parallel.
Yes, true. And we do have a little better funding than we had 3, 4, 5 years ago.
So we got 20-some days to decide whether or not a response is going back. If we don't respond, then we just move along. If we do respond, then we have another, 60 days that they're going to look at our response. Is that correct?
That's right.
And you're saying that the Casitas is going to pay any legal advice or for the subcommittee?
Yep.
So we're really talking about a
We
couple
have-
of weeks?
We have Peter coming back on Monday or Tuesday.
Okay, so what do we got to lose? Spend a couple of
That's-
weeks. yeah.
That's what, other than some time, and
And our attorney.
Yeah. Is Casitas paying for our attorney too? How much is our attorney going to cost us?
No, I don't think that was discussed.
Well, I don't have a problem with meeting with them. It's fine. We give, it's good for the two agencies to talk about it. So if you're not available, I'll be happy to fill in for you. So,
I'm available for the next, 14 days.
okay.
Okay, so no objections, so what?
Let's have an ad hoc committee and talk to Casitas and see what we can come up with. But you need to start thinking about how to make it happen. And I'll keep you informed about what.
Yeah, well, we've in the budget committee, we've talked a little bit about it, and like I said, I think Jim and I are making some progress. Working with Casitas, I think, is an important part of that.
It is.
On some of the elements. But I think, as a board, I think we're gonna have to be willing to put in some effort on this.
Yeah.
Because developing these undesirable results, defining those, that's what we're gonna be doing. We're not gonna have a consultant do it.
Well,
So-
you want me to read you what the undesirable results are according to the law? I can be glad to do it. No evidence of chronic lowering of groundwater levels indicating a significant and unreasonable depletion of supply. That doesn't happen here, except during drought. No evidence of significant and unreasonable reduction of groundwater storage. That doesn't happen. No evidence of significant unreasonable seawater intrusion. That can't happen. No evidence of significant and unreasonable degraded water quality. Well, at the deepest part of the basin, there is some, but that doesn't affect either the discharge or the extraction. So that doesn't happen.
And it may have been there historically.
Yeah, it's a
Probably.
lake bottom.
Well, you're telling me what undesirable results we want to avoid. What the state wants us to do is adopt those and define exactly what they are. If it's a basic storage level, if it's a total dissolved solids and water quality, I mean, there's particular targets that we have to define. Those are general, but it's up to us to come up with what those exact undesirable results are.
Richard, we did that in the alternative demonstration, and they're not buying it. So I don't know.
But you
I don't
didn't
know
put
what
it,
we're
there's
doing.
no controls to prevent it from happening if it starts occurring. The
So-
alternative plan basically says everything's fine. And that isn't gonna fly. It's just not gonna fly. Because we don't know what's gonna happen in the next 20 years. So if things change, the basin goes down lower, or we get some new constituent that contaminates the water, we got fish and wildlife beating on us because there's not enough stream flow, we don't have a way to control it. And that's what the plan is about, is controlling it so it remains sustainable.
So
If it
you're-
is sustainable now, great. All we have to do is define what that is and put the controls in place to keep it there.
That's fine. I agree. So we'll figure out fairly quickly. I'll give you a call about when we're going to get everybody together. Okay? Do you have a problem with going to the tall building in Oxnard?
No.
Good.
I can get to the 21st floor.
Good. Okay. Let's have a.
You have to walk the last
Are
one.
you taking any comments?
Yes.
Get up to the mic.
Good evening, directors. My name is Tony Morgan. I'm a vice president at Daniel B. Stevens and Associates and director of their water planning and development group there. So I've been up to my eyeballs in SIGMA and DWR meetings and GSPs and stakeholder engagement meetings and the whole 9 yards. So one thing I wanted to mention to you, there is an opportunity for grant money from DWR coming out, planning grant money on 68, I think it is, but the fuse is short on that, so you want to jump on that sooner rather than later to make sure you're in the hat to get some of that planning money to help support whatever you end up doing as far as a GSP. So that's one piece of advice. The other thing, every GSA we work with struggles with the adoption of management criteria. What's that minimum threshold look at below which the results are deemed undesirable? You can have significant impacts, but they have to be significant and unreasonable to be undesirable, and you set what that is. So stakeholders tell you their opinion and what they think it ought to look like. You propose something in general. For example, we'd like to not see groundwater elevations be any lower than what they were in the last drought that we just came out of. Okay, that's a concept. The technical people then run off and say, what does that mean? What does that look like? And we come back to you and say, this is how you could manage your basin to make that happen. So it's kind of a triad kind of thing. Stakeholders are inputting as to what you're deciding what that looks like in general. The technical people say, what do we need to do to make it happen? So it's one of those iterative processes, doesn't happen overnight, and trust me, there will be discussions about it.
Okay.
Some of them excited discussions, most likely, but there will be discussions about how that happens. So I agree with you that you're way ahead of the curve. You've got data, you've got modeling, you got lots of things that many basins don't. So chalk yourself up some brownie points for that, for having those tools in the toolbox. Okay? But assembling the GSP is as much technical as it is political and social. It's the stakeholder engagement. It's getting buy-in from everyone, maybe not everyone, but the majority of the people as to what ought to be done to manage the basin. And so it's stakeholder engagement meetings. It's you as a board saying, what are our guiding principles? What are those things that we as a board can we hold these beliefs to be self-evident. It's something that everybody on the board can agree that that's something you want to do and you want to accomplish. So those are some of the preliminary things you got to get through. They're not exciting technical stuff to do, but they're foundational things that need to happen. So you've got a deadline potentially facing you in January 2022. That's not a horrible timeline, but I would urge you that it's not a timeline that there's room to dawdle, because everything always takes 3 times longer than you think it's going to take when you start down this process. And the requirements and the desirability of having stakeholder engagement and public review of various drafts of documents and those kinds of things, they really start to eat up the calendar when you lay out to January 2022 and start backing up in time when you have to do things. It is really one of those things where you don't want to dawdle, but it's not really necessary to go at breakneck speed. But losing 90 days at this point in time is something that you got to think about, because I have a couple of basins where that's happening, where things aren't getting done on a timeline that we had hoped they would, and it's going to delay the schedule. And what it does is it eats up all your buffer in your schedule, and you're going to end up against a wall down the road. So if I can be of help to you as a sounding board, if nothing else, then folks here know how to get a hold of me. I've known Jordan for quite a while. Give me a ring, and we can at least brainstorm over some cup of coffee about some ideas and things.
Leave your card, Tony.
All right, I will do that before I leave.
Thanks.
Thank you.
And I'm surprised that you are no longer with United. I didn't hear that.
Yes, so I've been with DB Stevens for a little over a year now.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, it's good to see you.
Thank you.
Well, to some degree, isn't the alternative plan the self-evident
Yes.
approach? Yeah. Maybe we
Okay.
didn't have enough people voting on the self-evident.
Yeah, I'd just like to say 90 days from now puts us into next year as
Yeah.
far as our,
Right.
so.
Okay, so on the table is an ad hoc committee of Jim Finch and Russ Baggerly, and Jordan's going to come along, and John, you are too, if you're available. And Richard's going to take over when Jim can't do it. Let's have a,
Without objection, ordered.
without objection, yeah, I can set up an ad hoc committee anytime I want, can't I?
You can ask if there are any objections
Are
first.
there- No. Are there any objections to that? Make it so. Thank you.
I would just like to add, I would not like to see us not respond, even if the response is thank you.
I agree. Wow, where were we? And thanks again, John. Yep.
I know I've asked, everybody here has heard me talk about, let's try to get a grant or something. It just doesn't, what Richard hasn't heard me talk about, if you're new onto the board here.
We would definitely do that, Larry.
I think we need to find out the timeline and really apply for this, because if, that's it.
Thank you. We
Well,
will definitely
let
do
me-
that.
We should
Let me-
not let this die in the dust here.
Yeah, and I don't want to leave this, because I've said this for 2 meetings now. And unless Tony knows something I don't, the grant applications for the last round are closed, according to the DWR website, or the Sigma website, and you can't apply. And so they have draft regulations out for review, and they're expecting to get those approved sometime this year with money available in 2020. That's what I'm hearing. So, and they're talking about every time I've looked at these, they talk about a 50% cost share. Unless you're a disadvantaged community, and I don't think Ojai fits that bill. But, so unless I'm missing something, there's not money available anytime soon, and state money comes with an awful lot of conditions.
Sure
You spend a
does.
lot of money to get state money. So, I just want to make sure everybody's aware of this.
We actually know that. Thank you.
What size are the grants that are being approved, dollars?
You ask for what you think you need, and you hope you can get it.
You can get up to $2 million to
Okay, so then you have to have $1 million to match it.
match.
Right, okay, well, so it's important to figure out what we
And-
think we need.
And the staff at DWR did say they could probably provide some assistance toward that application process. I think, I'm not so sure we need assistance in application, we need assistance in finances. Would be preferred.
What would the assistance be? Would they provide a grant writer to help us to get that done?
No, I don't think so.
They might guide us in the right direction and help us fill out those applications. I'm not sure what Upper Ventura River did, but we,
Maybe Upper Ventura River could give us some guidance.
yeah, and,
I understand they had a good grant writer from
yeah.
several comments that he wants to.
Yeah, we spent probably $30,000 to get the $630,000, and the
Yeah.
grant writer that we used is up in Northern California, and is busy with other activities up there, so she's not available. She was very, very good, though, Lori Walter.
But you have a 50% cost share?
It's 25%.
25, okay.
Disadvantaged communities.
Oh, that's right,
Changed
that's right.
their guideline. Initially, they said you could claim all the money that cost to set up the agency going back to January 2015, and then they changed their mind and said that doesn't apply. So they kind of gave us the 50 to 25 to offset that change on the position.
Thank you. Next is action item 8D, the well permit application. Jordan, did you go over this?
I did take a quick look at it, and unfortunately, the assessor's parcel map that they provided as the sole location indicator for the proposed well is a little arcane, so
Sure
we would
is.
need to overlay this onto the basin boundary map and determine whether or not this
Exactly.
well is going to be into the alluvial portion of the basin or into the bedrock aquifers that are also agency jurisdiction. Generally, they're looking at 1 acre foot per year or less for extraction. They are likely going to be extracting from bedrock exclusively, and it may be a condition of the permit that the seal be adequately through the alluvium, similar to those that we've issued before.
So we can't really tell whether or not it's within the basin boundary or not, right? I couldn't.
It's a pretty close, it's going to need a little bit extra review, and I'm happy to do that. But they don't have any really well-designed depth that they're describing here. So we'd like to know a bit more about what their plan is.
Shall we bring this back next month?
Or direct staff if it's acceptable. My suspicion is that it will be fine.
Do that?
Can we do that, John?
Bring it back?
No,
Delegate.
allow staff to go over it and make sure everything is track.
Yeah.
They're not gonna move that fast, I wouldn't think, on drilling the well. Why not just
Bring it back.
bring it back?
Okay.
That's fine with me. Let's table this until next month with all the information that you think is necessary, Jordan, to satisfy your inquisitiveness.
Since I wasn't here during that time, is the county's moratorium, has that been suspended?
Yes, as soon as we turned in our alternative demonstration, the,
No, the permitting new well moratorium.
yeah, it stopped as soon as we turned in our alternative demonstration.
Are you talking countywide?
Yes.
Oh, no, it's,
No.
This
But
is just-
Sigma, yeah.
this was just for the Ojai Basin.
There are certain, did you get 8D?
Yeah.
And it tells you conditions where you can drill a well during the
Oh,
moratorium.
okay. So there's still a moratorium, it's just, there's special conditions?
I think it's a replacement and public agencies are exempt, and then other than that, it's a waiver.
That's not what the original law said. It said as soon as we turn in our,
No, but,
Plan.
but remember that Supervisor Bennett put one forward, I think, before Sigma came out. So there was the county moratorium that hit.
yeah, it was bigger.
And then, so then who supersedes what, I don't know, but I don't, and maybe they did some action that didn't, because, that did rescind it because Sigma kicked in.
Yeah, okay.
So the county's asking us to to approve the waiver?
They're asking for comments.
Okay.
Because the OBGMA has a no-fee permit, the best way to have that communication with the property owner and contractors is through the permitting process.
Yeah, okay.
Didn't we have one of these like a year ago out at the East End, same circumstance?
Yes.
And, yeah, it went to the county. They
Mhm.
didn't seem to have any concern at their end if we didn't.
I don't know if that well's ever been drilled.
But here the question is kind of where the line falls, is one of
There's a
the
little
real
bit of
question.
that. We'd like to know really if we should put any conditions on there.
Where, just as you describe it, where do you think they're proposing to drill the well?
It's somewhere
Above the recharge?
Yeah, above the recharge.
But is it over the hill, or is it on?
That's where we gotta overlay the map they have. So we'll request from the driller, more information.
Good.
I just have a question. It's a large parcel. Do they have another water hookup, or is it, I mean, it seems like it's about 10 acres, and they're only gonna use 1 acre foot of water a year?
My understanding is there's two documents. One says they'll use between 1 and 2 acre feet per year, and the other one says they'll use less than 1 acre foot per year. So that's something we'd like to get straight, of course. My understanding is just for purposes, as opposed to irrigation, and that the claim is that they have no other alternative source.
Nothing's on it. Bare.
Okay, so we'll get all that information and bring it back next month. Okay. Action item 8C is Ojai Day, which we do every year.
It's actually 8E. On my handwriting bad.
Oh, 8E, sorry, thank you.
What day
This
was
one I was
that?
blind. The 19th.
August?
It's on the staff report.
Oh, that's right. And typically between, I know board members attend, I've attended before at no charge to the agency. CC spends some time there, but she sets up and tears down, so it's a long
She
day for
does a
you.
lot.
And usually there's some kind of a handout, bags or something, but probably no more than $500 or $600 spent. Well,
That's-
plus, do you have a budget?
Well, I put it on here. Did you read it?
Oh, I'm sorry.
The rental
Talk about
fee is
what-
$150, and she
Yeah.
bought 300 bags,
Yeah.
or 250 bags for
And I put
$300.
staff hours of 8. I didn't buy bags yet.
Yeah.
I've had those bags for like 3 years.
Yeah.
Good, okay, that's good. All right, I think
that-
we need to do this. It's outreach, and it's good for the public to know that we're here and available. Is there any objection?
We're talking about less than $500?
Probably. So, if there's no objection, please make it so. We'll go
Okay.
to Ojai Day.
Yeah, and the $300 for the bags, we don't hand all those bags out at the OID.
No.
They'll last a couple of years, maybe? Yeah, so I'd say it's gonna be between your time and a little bit, few bags and the fee.
And the
it's-
fee.
Yeah, you're probably 500 or a little bit less.
Mhm.
Okay, next is discussion items. Item 9A is the draft budget for 2019 and 2020.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you an overview. We did meet Monday on a draft budget. I put a document together. Directors Hages and Johnson had comments and requested me to modify a few things. We need to try and put some account numbers and then start tying account numbers back to expenditures and some of the regular board reports. And we're going to try and make some of the categories a little more clear and more defined. We'll put some verbiage to the categories to let you know what's actually being spent under those line items. So that's what we're working on. We hope to have something to you next month.
Okay.
So I just want to give you an update on that discussion.
We also discussed developing a financial control policy.
Oh, yeah.
So I hope we have that next month to respond to the audit and just to do business better.
Just remember, we don't want to hire 2 extra employees in order to do that.
We're actually going to put you to work.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a draft
And
document
me to
that,
watch you.
I don't think it's very onerous.
Yeah.
No,
And the board's been approving things anyway, so we'll
Sure.
keep it in that direction.
it's just to have a policy in place so everybody knows the rules.
Good.
And there's, several sets of eyes on everything. The other thing we did talk about too is taking a look at our expenses, and this next draft budget round, we've asked staff to put together a budget that is simply the bare bones expenses for operating, so that we can see how much resources we have in light of what we may have to pursue over the next 2 years. So we're, at this point, have no special projects or anything like that included in the budget. We'll bring that back to the full board for discussion.
Okay. Moving on, we have 9B, which is conjunctive use planning. I understand you guys met.
Once or twice, I think. Maybe it was once.
That's a good report.
Once it was pushed back, so scheduled it twice, met once. And I think Richard's been instrumental in it. But it's unfortunate, but we are getting to, I think, a lot of what, if some of what we've been discussing was in the alternative, would probably get an approval, or we'd at least be able to show that there were some controls. And it's, trying to figure out gas pedal brake on wells, and I don't know, the list goes for 3.5 pages. I don't know how many wells it is. How many wells is it? 300?
In the basin?
In the basin.
160 some?
160 some.
3.5 pages. It felt like more, but really, when you throw the data on years of usage, you really get to where you only need to look at the first page almost to really have the biggest effect on the gas pedal or the like. And then when you group them together and you throw either Golden State or now Casitas, you realize that now you can get down to talking to about 15 people, and you're having the biggest, it's the 80-20 type of rule. And trying to figure out, Jordan's been doing some work on, where that trigger is of 85% full, 82%, 81%, and looking at some things of what. So I think a lot of the discussion, as I say, it's kind of unfortunate that it wasn't 8 years ago or 5 years ago, has worked towards some of the controls that would be needed. And I think this is what Richard was alluding to, Casitas is one of the big gas pedals or brakes. And so starting to have that discussion and the introduction with this ad hoc, I think is a good start. And that's my take on it. Because trying to affect all 150 wells or whatever it is gets to be probably herding cats. And it's those top 20 wells or top 25 that are where you're going to have the big impact. Those bottom 80% of the wells, until we get down to the dribs and the drabs, it's not going to matter really. That's my take.
I think the other thing is how Casitas operates those wells is going to be an important part of it. One of the things we talked about is the difference between operating on demand, where all the pumping in the basin takes place during the summer months. Casitas would have the ability to pump on a continuous basis and if they put it into their system, because the demand, even in the lowest demand periods, would probably consume what those wells produce. May take a big strain off certain places in the basin. So I think what's important at this point is that we start having that discussion with some people at Casitas, particularly the ones that have some technical understanding of what's going on. And I think it would be important to do before Casitas commits to spending any money on their well projects, so that what they do is mutually beneficial to the basin and to their service area, because there may be other alternatives than operating the way Golden State operated.
Okay, thank you for that report. Let's see, the next one is 9B, C.
Oops.
Should be C. There's nothing to report. There hasn't been any remediation meetings or anything else, so that one is done. Are there any informational items? CC? It doesn't look like it.
No.
Does the board have anything else they want to discuss? Then we will adjourn this meeting at 6:22.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Are you guys be interested